Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Kayla Unfiltered, the housing call-in show. Let's kick off another episode of real conversations, real stories, and real housing issues that impact landlords, tenants, and taxpayers across Ontario. Before I bring on my next guest speaker, I want to give you some quick highlights from the ever-evolving, sometimes chaotic world of housing policies. Here's what's happening. Sarnia is preparing to report back to council on implementing a renovation license. Chatham-Kent, following a motion from Councillor Crew, has directed staff to explore renovation licensing as well, with a draft bylaw expected in June. Hamilton has officially begun enforcing its safe apartment building bylaw, requiring annual registration for rental buildings with 2 or more stories and 6 or more units. And here's where things get really interesting. The January 26th audit from the Hamilton Barton project revealed massive government failures, projecting a 28 billion or 51 billion deficit that they had going on. They vetting the supplier, so within vetting the supplier to their project, the units purchased without proper contracts or warranties, get that, 500,000 in repairs required to just meet safety standards. That's a lot of money. The audit concluded that the urgency overtook proper oversights and taxpayers paid the price. At the same time, Hamilton is now surveying residents on a proposed maximum adequate temperature bylaw that could require landlords to maintain a cooling standard in rental units. The report suggested 70% of surveyed tenants experience extreme heat issues and 98% supported cooling protections, no figures. Proposed solutions range from mandatory AC requirements to subsidies and installation upgrades. I know, it gets worse. And then we have Guelph. A landlord couple was left with nearly 6,000 in unpaid tenant water bills after 5 years, added directly to their property taxes. The city stated that due to the privacy regulations, landlords are not notified of the tenant status, and it's up to the landlords to be responsible to confirm the payments. So once again, private property owners are absorbing the risk they may not even be aware of exist. I'm sure we'll touch on this throughout the show. But tonight I'm excited. I'm too excited. But let's welcome our guest, Jordan Nieuwhof, the public speaker, landlord, and former paralegal with over 10 years in the trenches at the Landlord and Tenant Board. Jordan has stepped away from his legal representation to focus 100% on education and public speaking. He runs the Canadian platform for Sell More Offers Challenge and specializes in teaching landlords not just about what the law says, but how to present it to a judge. Because knowing the rights isn't enough, you don't know how to communicate them effectively in a hearing. Tonight, we're talking about LTB issues, non-payment of rent, which we know a lot about in Ontario, process mistakes landlords make throughout the Landlord and Tenant Board, and how to prepare for your hearing. Plus, we're going to talk about what the adjudicators are actually looking for. So how to walk in confident instead of overwhelmed, plus tools like front lobbies, monthly rent reporting, and debt reporting to the credit bureaus can help protect our property income. Jordan's mission is simple: to help you walk into a hearing room not as a nervous victim, but as a confident, prepared authority. If you're ever felt frustrated by the process, which we all have, if you have ever left a hearing thinking, I wish I've known that, we all have. If you're currently waiting on a non-payment file, we have Jordan here tonight to share his experience and his wisdom with all of us. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer: all content shared in this discussion is intended for general information and advocacy purposes only. Nothing said should be taken as legal advice. Opinions expressed here are personal views based on the publicly available information and experience. For guidance on landlord or tenant matter, please consult with a qualified legal professional. Jordan is not that today. I got you covered. And a big thank you to our sponsors, Front Lobby. We have Landlord Credit Bureau. We also have the Canadian Tenant Inspection, also known as CTI, Coffee and Mortgages. We have Interest Commercial Real Estate. Thank you so much for all your support. The Cooperators, Ray Johnson and Associates, KW Property Management, and last but not least, Renovation Solutions. We appreciate your support for our housing education and advocacy. All right, let's get into it. It's been a mouthful, but I am excited. It's Thursday. I have Jordan, this guy I talked to on the phone, guys, and I was like, we know he went away from the legal practice. We know a little bit why. And I was pumped that he was going to be coming on for this Kayla Unfiltered. Huge shout out to Tyler Media. He's doing this background, trying to be a little professional so that we can entice our elected officials to want to come on the show one day, letting them know that we're very serious about our advocacy work and our education for landlords. But Jordan, how are you, my friend?
Kayla, that was the warmest introduction of any. I am good, thank you, and excited here to talk about landlord issues right across the province. And I know you said I no longer go to the board, but 10 years of being in front of those adjudicators, it eventually wears on you, especially when there's inconsistent rulings, and it's best described sometimes as a clown show there.
Oh, they call it the kangaroo court system for a reason, my friend.
That's being polite.
You came out with every color of your, like, unless you're dyeing your hair, you look great. Like, I thought you'd be beaten up a little bit more.
It's taken a whole year off to recover from that nonsense. When you say into the trenches, for sure.
Now tell me, why did you want to become a paralegal in the beginning?
Well, that's actually a great question. It's a fair question. It's for the fight for justice and all the injustices that happen. When I originally started nearly 11 years ago now, it was actually in traffic. And one of my very first cases was stunt driving. And I dabbled in traffic for quite a long time. Ended up in Niagara Falls and fighting against public health for the hotels. And when I was fighting with public health for the hotels, they quickly started to get LTB issues because the police are hands off. They're not kicking anybody out. They said it's an LTB issue. So while I was doing public health and fighting for pool regulations, hotel regulations, I started the Landlord and Tenant Board and getting these tenants out. And it ballooned from there because the injustice in the Landlord and Tenant Board is like nothing seen in any other board or adjudicative process. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I spent a good 10 years in that doing it. I've never seen so many inconsistent rulings in my life, and going in front of every single adjudicator is okay. Who's going to twist and incorporate and interpret the law in a weird and stretchable way today? And that's what it was like. It's almost like you could take a bunch of decisions and a bunch of cases and pull out a bunch of things, and each one's different, even though it's the same facts, same parties, different adjudicator, different outcome. How can you have a justice in an injustice system like that? It's just not possible.
And it's the lack of education that they're giving some of these landlords and tenants when they walk into the place. And that's the one thing that I see when you go in and you have an adjudicator. It's almost like they're just ready to give you the mic and just sit there, and you can spend about 3 hours just talking. And they don't really care to stop you, even though it's not even relevant to why did you not pay your rent?
Well, it's the blind leading the blind. Not only the landlords don't have the education, the tenants don't have the education, but they push through so many adjudicators and they don't have the education themselves. I don't know how many times I was arguing with the adjudicator to pull up the law because the law is very clear on how it is written. And they would have to pause and check and go away for 10 minutes to come back and go, okay, and then come up with some sort of case law argument to support their position. Follow the law and don't twist it. If the adjudicators had go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, are most landlords losing because the law is against them, or are they losing because they don't understand how to proceed?
I think it's a fair combination of both, to be honest. If you're a self-represented landlord and it's the first time you're in front of the adjudicator, that can be tough, especially if you're not fully equipped with understanding the law, understanding the Residential Tenancies Act and all of the regulations. And it doesn't help when you get these adjudicators that are then twisting the law or making it more difficult for the landlord because their interpretation of the law is out of whack. And then each adjudicator will tell you something different. So if they were observing, which many individual landlords do, if they were observing a bunch of hearings and listening and going, okay, I'm good, and then go in front of an adjudicator on that day, and that adjudicator is saying something completely different, where do you win? How do you prepare? And I've seen that before. I don't know how many times I've seen one board member say something completely contrary to another board member, and they justify it by saying, well, I have jurisprudence, and this is my room, so this is how things are going to be done.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like the way that it happened. I think this case was at the Landlord and Tenant Board about 3 different times. And it was a husband and his parents, and he didn't have a wife in the house at all. And then all of a sudden he said to the landlord that he was leaving the property. And then once he left the property, the mother, the ex moved into this home, and she was deemed to be the tenant, even though they were going through a divorce. And they gave the tenant like all this ex-spouse all the rights to the property, and here she had never lived in the property. And it's almost like the other one where it was the husband who left, and that's obviously went through the Landlord and Tenant Board, went to the Supreme Court, where they had to vouch to say that she was the tenant, she was the spouse, but I think the spouse actually didn't know that as he was giving notice to vacate, because he was the only one that was on the lease. He was actually giving away the unit, and she had to fight to say that no, she was a co-spouse and she had rights to the unit as well. And then the Supreme Court had overturned all of the adjudicators who said that she didn't have any rights to it. Like, we now have 2 court systems having to deal with simple procedures, that there's nothing ever in black and white. What would be the most concerning thing, like, of all of the things that we can talk about at the Landlord and Tenant Board, what's the number one concerning thing that you have?
Wow, there's a whole
we got time. We have about an hour, and we're going to have some clips.
That's fair. Well, one of the biggest concerning things, I think, is the lack of judicial oversight when it comes to the board and how the adjudicators are appointed or not appointed. They don't need any legal qualification at all to be an adjudicator. They could be real estate, insurance, friend of someone, but they don't need any specific legal education to become an adjudicator. Mm-hmm. A judge needs legal training, and they need to tend to be a lawyer, unless you're a deputy judge, for 10 years to become a judge. They're trained. They're exceptionally trained. Adjudicator, not like that. Why are there not some great standards for appointing adjudicators instead of, okay, we're going to pick a hat here, let's do this one. They don't have legal background, but we're going to train them. This is how you get rulings that are absolutely inconsistent with the law. So that's a grave concern. And another grave concern is the inconsistency in how the rulings are made. A senior adjudicator can rule differently from a junior adjudicator, and they're not bound by our system unless it goes to divisional court to make a ruling. So you get these inconsistencies. 2 exact cases presented in front of 2 different adjudicators, 2 different outcomes. How is that justice or consistency anywhere across the province? And how can a landlord make business decisions when the law is so inconsistent?
How would you want to change that? It's
abolishment of the Landlord and Tenant Board for a proper legal system that's consistent. That's what we need here. We don't need uneducated adjudicators willy-nilly making laws for landlords and tenants when we have a proper qualified court system to be able to do that.
So are you talking like small claims court that you would want people to go to, or?
The argument would be that it would clog up the system. I'm not saying that we need an entirely new system like a small claims court. We need to abolish what we have right now and set standards for proper adjudicators with training, legal training, professional, and to follow a set of laws. Like, how hard is it to say, be consistent with your decision, follow the laws, and don't twist it ridiculous? One case I had, Member Van Hola looked at a landlord who was hemorrhaging money and said, You're a landlord. This is your business. You should have weathered the storm. How is that appropriate for any landlord of any size in this province? I'm dead serious. Yeah, that landlord absolutely lost it.
Which adjudicator is this?
Oh, this is member Van Hola.
Oh my God. Well, it's almost like they think that you can afford it. So they're starting to use, just like government is, the landlords as a social agency with no compensation. And what did the landlord, how did the landlord react?
The landlord sent the most scathing possible email back to the Landlord and Tenant Board and Van Hola there, and actually got the matter recalled within weeks. It was an adjournment for a specific reason. But the tenant, of course, playing the system, had multiple adjournments before, but this matter came back exceptionally quick. So I applaud Van Hola for doing that, but the reasons for the adjournment I disagree with. And how can you say to a landlord, oh, you know what, you should weather a storm because you're losing money? How is that appropriate to say any business?
Yeah, it's the type of messaging that we're getting from like tenants online, that it's an investment. You actually can make money and you can lose money. Like, it's a risk. Like, you have to weather the storm. It's your job to do this. And it's funny. Is she still an adjudicator?
I believe today, yeah, she's still an adjudicator.
Okay, we have to talk to our friends at Rent and Zen to track some of these adjudicators and how they're ruling lately. Because I've always had that, where if you look at their background to where they came from, and they're, come on, speak it up.
We live in an era right now.
People hear me talk all the time. This is you. If you want to intervene, you intervene, my friend.
What you're saying is we live in an era right now with AI that can analyze hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions quickly, effectively, and pull out these biases on how these adjudicators rule. And you nailed it. If you review some of these adjudicators, you'll see that they have a social tribunal background, that are obviously land or tenant friendly ruling. And you'll see other ones that are investor, that are landlord tenant friendly ruling. We have the ability today to take all of these cases, which are public and online, sort through the data, and find the bias points for each and every single adjudicator. Anyone out there capable of doing it and putting and agitating the data together should be doing it. These adjudicators don't go blindly. They're supposed to, but we can see the biases. And I've seen the biases for 10 years. We talk about the biases. You read the biases online. The data will show in those case laws the biases. You watch. If we agitate that data, they'll show the biases.
Oh my, I'm so in tune to what you're saying. I forgot that we have comments coming in. So I try to make this as engaging as possible. It's about sharing the voices of our community. You never know who's watching this show. So thank you so much for everyone who's jumping on. Go over to the Ontario Landlords Watch YouTube channel, making sure that you're come on. I don't really see anything on Facebook, unfortunately. I don't know why. I'm still working out the details. And I put up everybody. So surprise, cities aren't imposing rent control on new builds yet, or imposing caps or less the province increase limits. We also want to talk about rent control. Everyone thinks that it's been abolished, and I think all new rental units are coming like crazy. For example, the N8 for persistently late is different with every member of what counts as persistent. So I think this is where Bill 60 comes in, where they are trying to set that groundwork to find out what is going to be considered persistently late, so that all adjudicators should be consistent with that type of change, which is why I'm very shocked that our municipal city mayor of Mississauga is trying to put the brakes on implementing and proclaiming Bill 60. So thank you so much for that comment there. C. Freeborn said, yeah, I agree. We'll have to figure out what they agreed to, but I love the comments because I should have been watching while you're talking. I had 2 cases regarding the lack of tenant insurance, received 1 order for eviction. The other adjudicator said, I don't see how this is interference, and dismissed it as declaring. What do you got to say about that one?
That is another common one here. What is landlord interference and what is not? It's absolutely ridiculous. This book here, and Kevin wrote it, it has in here, it's absolutely ridiculous on the line of interference. The tenant burnt down the house. We put in specifically a request to shorten the time for a hearing, And the board didn't find it as substantial interference that had grave safety issues because the house was burnt down. Like, okay, so the house is gone now. That doesn't mean it's going to be rebuilt and the tenant can move back in. But because the house is burnt down, we don't need to deal with it anymore. It's no longer a grave safety issue. But the tenant has the right to come back, right? Unless it's argued that's frustrated contract. These inconsistencies can be found all over the place. Like the new law. What is considered a minor technicality error on an N4 and what is considered a major technicality error on an N4? What's saved, what's not? Read the background of your adjudicator, and if they're coming out of the social tribunals of Ontario, there's a good chance that they're going to be tenant friendly. If they're coming from an investment background, they're going to be landlord friendly. Read the bios of the adjudicators. That's going to give you a good hint on how your hearing is going to go, whether they're tenant leaning or landlord leaning. That's not right. Judges don't do that. They're not supposed to do that. Why can the board do that?
I've seen a very pro-tenant adjudicator with a tenant that was professional, and they were almost about to deny the eviction based on $1.20 because the tenant was paying 1 and then 2 cents more and then 3 cents more. And so during the calculations, it was $1.20 that wasn't claimed in payments, and they were trying to deny the eviction based on the $1.20 on a debt that was $43,000.
There was a paralegal ranting on one of the paralegal forums exclusive that they had their application dismissed for a penny.
Okay. Do adjudicators expect the landlords to act like lawyers through their hearing, or like is it more like they are a little bit more lenient to the landlords?
They're lenient to all, or more lenient to all self-represented parties. We're held, and adjudicators will say this through and throughout, as legal professionals, we're held to a higher standard than self-represented individuals. Where you'll get this, if you're reading on the landlord forums, they'll say that the adjudicators give more friendliness to the tenants. And if you're reading on the tenant forums, they'll say the opposite. So it seems to be really, truly mixed. I think the difference is the attitude going into the hearing on how much patience the adjudicator is going to have. If you're trying to comply with all of the rules and doing a decent job at listening and understanding, they're going to be more kind with you than the self-represented person that goes in, ignores all the rules and starts yelling, screaming, and crying, which we see from both sides of the fence. They're going to get a lot fewer of the adjudicator's patience. And if you come in with organized documents, that seems to put a smile on the adjudicator's face. If you come in with everything all mixed up and it doesn't look like you're taking it seriously, they're going to show you the door really quickly. Their patience is just kind of gone. So I think it really depends on the attitude of the party going in and the adjudicator's mood on that day. There's some of the adjudicators that I've been through before, I'm like, oh, this one's always pleasant. It's going to be good. And then you go in and they're like, they take no shit from anybody whatsoever.
You're right. Like you can already see when they already look, whatever happened to customer service? Landlords are supposed to provide customer service. I expect customer service from our adjudicators as well. Be a little friendlier. I know they have to deal with a lot, and you get to hear a lot of the sad, sappy stories that they have to make it look like they're listening to it. But I think there needs to be a time frame in which they allow parties to duck, and they got to learn how to be like a Judge Judy and cut them off.
And some adjudicators are really good at keeping them straight on to the point, and other adjudicators will allow any party to ramble and ramble and ramble and ramble. And then everybody else waiting in line, I'm sorry, we ran out of time. You'll have to come back.
Don't get me started on that. And I think that's where we're getting a lot of adjournments happening and tenants knowing how to get adjournments. So we'll get back to that. Remind me to get back to that. What's the single biggest mistake landlords make the moment rent is late?
Believing the tenant. Believing your tenant that you're going to pay the rent next week or the week after. And I'm not saying that all tenants that don't pay rent are going to quickly catch up on it. If you've had a tenant for 10 years and this is the first time that they're late in 10 years and they said, hey, my bank froze my account, they're looking into it. Sure, that's most likely going to be believable. Are you going to slap them with an N4 right away? I might give a little bit of leeway on that. But if the tenant this is the third month that the tenant hasn't paid rent and I haven't done any action and they say they're going to pay next week because they've got a new job, I'm not believing that. You're getting an N4. A lot of professional landlords will report the rent as soon as it's late and consider either doing an N4 right away or filing a letter. Small landlords need to do this too. Take it seriously. Okay, I understand, tenant, that your rent is going to be late. Life happens. Here's your document. You have 7 days before I can file once proclaimed, but right now 14 days if it's a month-to-month tenancy to make your payment. And you can still give them that N4 while expressing that I understand, but this is my practice. I have to follow this as a blank. You can still do that while keeping a professional obligation and courtesy without bringing emotion into it. So issue the N4. Don't feel guilty about it. No other business feels guilty about taking an action. Sympathize with them. This is my process. This is what I've been advised to do, and give them the N4. Why wait? They have 14 days to pay up and settle it. Why give them any extra leeway?
You guys want to know what I look like as a male? It's Jordan. It's Jordan. Yeah. It's like, I got goosebumps. I totally got the goosebumps. And it's true. Like you got to put a business hat on. Like, yes, it's an investment, but it's a business and we need to treat it as such. And this is why it's so important to give that N4 application, because deep down the tenants do have access to rent relief. We have Olivia Chow on TikTok telling people about this rent bank that's available for anyone who had, an unexpected expense such as a root canal and they need help and they can go to rent bank. So we need to be giving these notices to the tenant like clockwork to let them know the seriousness of not paying their rent. And I like that Bill 60 is also talking about changing the wording to make it more serious of an offense to not pay your rent towards your landlord. And again, always encouraging our landlords to report the tenants' monthly payment history to front lobby so that it's reflecting on their credit, so that it gives them some incentives to pay their rent on time. Changing their behavior through rent reporting is critical through our times, and especially now when it's such a downturn and there is a lot of uncertainty that's happening, that's going on right now. So do you approve of the new change with 7 days down to 14 days with the landlord, with the new change with Bill 60?
Oh, 100%, absolutely. Why should a landlord have to wait to file a notice that they provided the tenant? The 14 days was just an absolute ridiculous delay. And you know what? It's a business decision. There's a cost. It costs money to file this application, and there's a good chance that the landlord may or may not get it back. As of course, it's going to be a debt owed if you can prove it. The only downside to this situation is if you file early and the tenant actually does go up and pays everything, now you have a dispute of the filing fee. The tenant's going to say, I don't know it. The landlord's going to say, yes, you do. And the board's going to make a decision, and that decision is going to be, as long as everything was properly filed, the tenant owes the filing fee. Are you going to go all the way to the board and argue a case over a filing fee? Did it once with the landlord to prove a point because the tenant didn't pay the filing fee. Most larger landlords will forget it, they paid up, and they don't seek that filing fee if it was paid and they're on good terms. So it's a business decision for the landlord. I like the change. There's no reason we had to wait for 14 days, for goodness sakes. If they're not going to pay it after 7 days, what's the chances of them paying it on day 14? And then 14 days later, 15 days later, rent's due again. How many times are we going to repeat this behavior? Let's just, 7 days is more than enough time. If a tenant is honest, genuine, has the funds coming, 7 days is decent enough. What is the point of the 14-day wait? It was cumbersome, it was ridiculous, and honestly, it made no sense. For shorter tenancies, less than a month, it was already 7 days. Why not apply it universally? And I'm glad that they went to shorten the time instead of making the other one wait 14 days. I think this was a good decision for all landlords. It's not going to fix it completely outright, but it's a step in the right direction. But you know what? Reporting is so unbelievably strategic by a landlord. I used to send out letters to tenants that didn't pay that talked about reporting the debt and hitting their credit bureau. That was number one thing to get a response from the tenant is, I'm going to report this to the credit bureau and here are the consequences. I got more responses from tenants than any other letters sent out. Believe it or not, most tenants out there, oh, you can't hit my credit bureau. They freak out and it elicits a response. That is so powerful. Honestly, if you're not reporting, you need to be reporting. It's a powerful, and I don't care if, I don't care, my credit score is already trashed. No, they care. They really, truly, honestly care no matter what.
Right. Frontlobby.com. You can report it without a landlord and tenant board order or without the tenant's consent. You only need the tenant's consent when you want to help your tenants build their credit or you have damages. You'll need an order for damages or you need the tenant's consent for a good payment history being reported. And I think a lot of good tenants do need that, especially through getting the approval process for a mortgage. So I'm glad that you said that, Jordan, because it's so crucial. It's so crucial, especially in Ontario. Now, when we're working with documentation, we're seeing a lot of landlords kind of trip up at the landlord and tenant board with documentation on a tenant not paying their rent. What have you seen, and what advice would you give our landlords as a speaker landlord, not as a paralegal?
As a landlord, it's non-payment of rent causes a stress, and acting hastily is probably one of the biggest detriments that you can do. Yes, you want to get that notice out right away. And it used to be, I need to get it out right now. I need to get it out right now. I need to get it out right now. We all make mistakes, and these mistakes are often not caught until well later. So I just draft the notice, breathe, and review it again. What's an extra day going to make in a 3 to 8 month wait to get a hearing? Anyways, to be honest, an extra day or two is minuscule compared to the entire process. So you want to make sure that your notice is 100% correct, no errors in it whatsoever. And that does mean drafting it, taking a step back, coming back to it, ideally a day later, maybe several hours later, and reviewing it all over again. What I did is draft another one. Yeah, it's a little bit more work, but draft another one. Compare the two. Are there any errors? Go through them and then send the notice out. To be honest, it's better to wait one more day to make sure that the notice is perfectly correct than it is to go, I need this out in an emotional hesitancy and push it out and you realize that the postal code's wrong or it wasn't signed or the date's wrong. Simple, silly mistakes that could be completely avoided if you take the emotion out of it.
How often are cases dismissed over these type of technicalities?
They used to be dismissed all the time. Any technicality error, great way to get it off the docket. And let's be honest, they're backed up. The adjudicators are backed up. They have a docket that's more time than they have in the day. If I can clear off a bunch of matters because they have technicalities, that's great. That's excellent. I can get through my entire docket. So what are you going to do? You're going to scratch them off because they have technical issues. There's an incentive. They don't come back, right? So I used to see it all the time. You'd sit there and in preliminary issue after preliminary issue after preliminary issue. The law was supposed to change that, but the adjudicator has so much deference on what a major error is that they can still go, okay, I find that confusing to the tenant because you reverse the date or the amounts off, therefore I'm dismissing it. There's no higher level court to determine what a serious error is or not. So the adjudicators still have the deference to dismiss the matters, and they're still being dismissed. If it's a minor technicality, the adjudicator might let it go through. But if it's a busy docket and that minor technicality looks like it could be interpreted as a major technicality, go back to the line, start again, dismissed. So yeah, it happens. I've had it for postal code issues, forgetting the unit number, landlord's not signing it. The big question here, Kayla, is if you notice that your notice is defective and you've already waited 6 months to get in front of the adjudicator, do you withdraw that notice and start over now, or do you allow it to get in front of the adjudicator and hope to mediate out with your tenant or hope to come to some sort of agreement to end the tenancy or a payment plan? Landlords often came to me at the last minute, the final hour. Their hearing is in a week or two. I need representation. Whatever reason they slept on it, they did, but now it's important. Business practices back of their mind. Who knows? But when when the notice was defective at that point, we had to make a decision. Number one, I had to tell the landlord that the notice was defective and there's a chance it's going to be dismissed. Once we got through the complete upset and swearing at the board over technicalities like this, we had to make a business decision. Do we withdraw the notice or do we allow it to proceed? I always allowed them to proceed no matter what. What's the point of withdrawing this when if we go to the hearing, we could possibly possibly get an agreement to end the tenancy. We could get an agreement on a payment plan that we know the tenant's never going to satisfy, but allows us to file for a breach right away. And if we could resolve it that way, we didn't have to wait the 6 to 8 months to come back. So if you're in that situation, be more creative to resolve it. Attempt to negotiate to end the tenancy, attempt to negotiate a payment plan, do something so it doesn't get in front of the board member where that technicality is caught, because it was quicker to get them up on a payment plan that we knew that they were never going to satisfy and then evict them that way than it would be to withdraw the application, come back, and start over again. It was always quicker to get them either to agree to end the tenancy or put them on a payment plan that we know nobody could satisfy. That was ideally the best strategy. And then, you get them on a breach and then out they go. The problem is when the tenant never showed up, that's when you're stuck. There's an error. And I hope the adjudicator doesn't catch that error. But as a licensee, we had an obligation to present it to the board member. You're supposed to present your errors to the board member. Yeah, I saw that face. I'm showing you my Law Society obligations here. Well, because we're supposed to act fair to the administration of justice. So your legal representative is not supposed to game the system. It's not legal for them. I know. Self-representative can game the system.
Can I be the landlord presenting myself, but I have you in the back room there, and you're I got a little earpiece, and you can tell me would that work?
I used to play in the background a whole heck of a lot, never actually in the room representing a lot of landlords, but I would be in the background, not during their hearing, but leading up to it on strategy and everything else, because not every landlord can afford to actual legal representation. So I did have a package to help guide them through those issues. And sometimes you have to jump in if it's going really south to go, whoa, I'm not their legal representative right now, but this is definitely going south. I'm going to have a minute to converse. That was important. But yeah, do you dismiss your notice if you know it's wrong, or do you continue? I allow them to continue every single time. What's the point?
No, even if you didn't have any errors in your paperwork, and would you always agree to mediation, or would you rather go to the adjudicator?
So that's a great question. Did I always agree to mediation? Oh yeah. Every single time I agreed to mediation. And here's why. Not always necessarily to mediate. If I could agree upon some facts, great. The tenant can't argue it later. But I wanted to hear what the tenant was going to say before we get up there. So I can now prepare lines of questioning well in advance. I could know if they're bringing up the, holy crap, my oven stopped working today. Well, I know now that I got to prepare for Section 83 and call the landlord and go, what the hell do you mean the oven's not working today? We did an inspection a couple of weeks ago.
Now backtrack a little bit. Know, Section 83, what's the Section 83?
Hey, great question. Section 83 is where the board is allowed to deny your eviction. Well, there's several sections to Section 83, but the one I'm specifically referring to here is the board is allowed to deny, actually mandated to deny your eviction if you have a serious breach to your obligations. And that's often vital services, heat, water, oven, if you were to provide it, electricity, and serious maintenance issues. Mm-hmm. Those you need to, before your hearing, make sure that all of those are in order, because the board member has obligated under law to deny if they find a serious breach. So I always told all my landlords, do a maintenance inspection 2 weeks before the hearing and make sure everything's good. So if we had that surprise that the oven doesn't work, what do you mean the oven doesn't work? We were there 2 weeks ago. You never brought it up then. Is it a serious breach because the oven isn't working on the day of the hearing? No, not necessarily. If the landlords first became aware of it and now on the phone getting the technician out there, it can't be a serious breach. The board members know things happen. If it's an oven that hasn't been in the unit for 6 months and you're supposed to provide one, you're in trouble. Same with heat and water and all that sort of stuff. And it has to be occurring on the day of the hearing. So if you've turned the electricity or the electricity was back on a couple days before, it's not an issue for the day of the hearing because the event had to be going on the day of the hearing. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying shut off the tenant's electricity, but if it comes back on before the hearing, it can't be a Section 83 issue.
Okay, that's good. Okay, let's take a break here. We're going to see everyone's the comments here. So we have Mary Rogers. She popped up. So if the tenants, to be able to get good credit from reporting rent, we must get it in writing to get permission from the tenant in writing. So you can get it through a clause in which Front Lobby has downloadable clauses for your application and for your lease to get there. But you also can just create the lease within Front Lobby. It gets emailed over to the tenants for the tenants to give consent through the platform there, Mary. We have chocolate muffins. I love it. I love chocolate muffins. My tenants wants me to cover the cost of cabinets and storage options in the home, but I am stretched for money. Any suggestions? Oh my God. Cover the cabinets, like brand new kitchen cabinets? That's just, I'm stretched for that too. You want to see my house? I got the original kitchen. But you should see my tenants though. They have nice kitchens. What do you say? What do you think about that there, Jordan?
I used to get those requests all the time. If it's fit for habitation, just because it's old doesn't mean it needs to be replaced. You have no obligation to replace the cabinets and provide storage if everything is in good order. And if it's fit for habitation, both physically and mentally, does it make a business sense to upgrade it? No, not with the tenants in there. Why would you want to put in and reduce wear and tear and depreciate the kitchen cabinets and the storage option while the tenant's in there? That's a renovation you would do after the tenant moves out. Is the tenant really going to be that upset that they leave? Maybe.
What if there's a possibility, thinking hat going on here? What if there was like an L10, I believe it is, for you're providing an actual service? Could they agree as a landlord and tenant to increase the rent on the unit if the landlord was capable of doing the cabinets and extra storage and options?
Oh my God, the theory trap. Yes, in theory, you're 100% right. Yes, absolutely.
How would they protect themselves? How would they protect themselves? Because I've seen it where a landlord, a tenant offered them to, I'll take this down here. They offered the tenant saying, I need to come in for personal use. They offered to pay more. The tenant paid that more up until literally 2 weeks shy of the 12 months, and then claimed that the landlord had increased the rent illegally.
And that has happened a lot. And what you are doing is you are leaving it up to the adjudicator to determine the legality of your agreement. And if you get a social friendly adjudicator, you're kind of screwed. And then what are you going to do? Pay out to go to appeal court because they made a bad and stupid decision on a lawful agreement? Why would a landlord in this legislative environment dare set themselves up for that type of risk? Do not do it under any circumstance. Yes, in theory, Kayla, you're 100% right that they can make that agreement and that can be done. But if they go ahead and challenge it, you have to defend it. And if you get an adjudicator that decides to interpret this wrong or find the agreement not correct, you're on the hook for the return, or you're on the hook to pay lawyers for a big appeal and a lot of time. So yes, in theory, 100%, you can do it. Why would you want to absorb that risk?
So chocolate, you say that there's no cabinets or shelves right now.
That's a difference.
Are we talking about cabinet, like kitchen cabinets, or just like extra storage in the rental unit? Like give us a little bit more there. We're trying to help you out. And if not, we'll definitely put Jordan's contact in the comments here, so you can reach out to him if we don't get back to you. But please let us know.
Let's talk about that for 2 seconds, because in the Residential Tenancies Act says even if there's a deficiency that the landlord and tenant is aware about before the tenant moves in, the landlord is still responsible for fixing it. Kayla, I agree. We don't have enough context here whether the kitchen cabinets are supposed to have cupboards or not, or shelves or not. If they're kitchen cupboards, like, your typical installed kitchen cupboards that manufacturally, what a word. But if it had manufactured installed shelves, the landlord's obligated to replace those shelves 100%. The board's going to find that a maintenance issue. It was installed with shelves. It needs shelves there. That's like supplying a fridge and removing all the shelves and go, well, you have a fridge. It doesn't work like that at all. But if this is different, if this is like, an empty closet for a food pantry and it doesn't have shelves, that's a different story. Because it wasn't manufactured. I'd love to see more on that.
It's almost like taking a rental unit that had like very small kitchen and now all of a sudden they need more storage to it. Now they want something more, maybe. I don't know, but we'll keep an eye in the comments waiting for that to happen. So I know I love that we have so much to talk about, and I want to make sure we try to cover and prepare everybody going into a hearing as much as we possibly can. So what should their evidence package look like? So we'll talk about non-payment of rent, because I think we're talking about non-payment of rent for this segment. And I swear, Jordan, you better be coming on probably next week. So we're going to I'm pushing for next week. We're having Jordan back on again. It's going to be like the Kayla and Jordan show.
Kayla, I will
change this logo.
I'm going to provide your audience base with an evidence template that I use. So I'll email it over to you.
Oh, that is awesome.
And it has what you should have in your evidence, so everybody can get it. However you send it over to your subscribers for download, we'll get it off to you. You can send it to them. It's plug and play for the landlord. Super beautiful. If you didn't retain me and you use me for coaching, this is what I send all my clients. I'm glad to share it with the community. But let's talk about what it needs to include.
Yeah.
Non-payment of rent, essential elements. This is about non-payment of rent. It's not about behavior or any other issues. So number one, what you really, really should have is a rent ledger, and not a shoebox rent ledger, not written out rent ledger, an Excel rent ledger, or I don't know, Kayla, does Front Lobby keep track of that sort of stuff on payments?
I know Landlord Credit Bureau, I just don't know it's downloadable yet, but don't worry. I'm taking all this information and giving it back to the team because I think it's very, very important to have that for landlords.
Excellent. So the rent ledger is most important, and not a written out one. If it's written out, like, hand paper, it upsets the adjudicators. Is it legible? Is it not legible? Yes, you can use it, but we prefer to see Excel files or one from a software. So you need a rent ledger. And how far? That was a good question. How far do you go back? I like to have gone back the rent arrears year, so the year of rent arrears, and then 1 year prior to when they were paying. That's how far I like to go back. You don't need the whole history of the rental unit, just when did they stop paying and the 12 months before. That was a good rule of thumb. I liked it because if there was a history, I could show a history. If there wasn't a history, then I can ask what was going on and explore why they were paying rent before and they're not paying now. So rent ledger is important. Do you put in your evidence brief a copy of your N4 certificate of service and application? I did. Why did I do that? Because I'm serving that on the tenant. And what I'm doing is I'm preventing the tenant's biggest adjournment request. I wasn't aware of this, or I don't have all of the documentation. And I could say, what do you mean you don't have all of the documentation? The N4, the application, the certificate of service is all in the evidence brief I served you 7 days ago. And it prevents adjournments of I don't have enough information. So I always included the N4, the application, and the certificate of service with my evidence brief. Another thing you need to send over in regards to what's called Section 83.6, and this is the payment plan. You must offer the tenant a payment plan. And board members on numerous occasions have said asking one time is not enough. So I plagued the tenant. It wasn't enough.
Okay, hold on. So if it's not enough to ask one time, what do you do when you ask more than once and then the tenants deem it to be harassment?
Yeah, great question. You cannot have, and most adjudicators are on board with this, harassment in honest communications discussing payment plans because of section 83.6. Now, can you text them every day and call them every day? No, don't do that. I like to follow, and we don't have to do this, but I like to follow what was already legislated in the Debt Settlements Act. And that for debt settlement people tell you how often that they can contact you. So the government has already made a determination in that agency with that act of how many times a creditor can contact a debtor. And I followed that. And essentially it was once in a period of every 7 days. Did we contact them every 7 days? No, but we didn't contact them sooner than 7 days unless they reached out to us, because that was already in the Debt Settlements Act. So if I was ever accused of harassing a tenant for my communication on reaching out for rent, I could go, member, in all due respect, Ontario legislation has already defined what a creditor can do, and I would show them the act. Now, does the adjudicator have to follow it? No. Does it set it up for appeal that it can't be harassment? Oh, heck, it does. I always had a copy of it. Never been accused of harassment, because most adjudicators would stop, well, you owe the money, he's satisfying section 83.6. So how often would I communicate? As soon as the rent is late, I'd often send out communications, and then I would send the payment plan completed. I would complete a payment plan for them, send it out with the N4. Hey, let's talk about the rent. I would send it out again at the time I'm going to file the application. Hey, I'm filing this application. Let's talk about the rent. And then I would send it out depending on the length of when I get a notice of hearing, once or twice in that time. Now with electronic hearings, we would schedule the hearing and we would get the notice. I would send that notice of hearing to the tenant again with the payment plan information going, hey, we have a notice of hearing on March 16th. Here's the payment plan information. And then I would do that one more time when I sent the notice of evidence that I'm required to reach out and serve them evidence. I would send them, hey, we're still willing to discuss the payment plan. Here it is. Why did I do it overkill? Because you don't know what the adjudicator is going to determine. Of
you're going to get.
Exactly. Well, I could never be accused of not communicating enough because we logically responded so many times where it made sense. And I can't be accused of harassment because the Debt Settlements Act already protects me. If it's not harassment for that creditor, how can it be harassment for me as a creditor? I bind the adjudicator to think twice before finding me in breach of the act.
Mm.
So,
okay, what else do we need?
Section 83.6 needs to be in there. Any communications you have need to be in there surrounding the rent payment, whether it's text messages, emails, things like that. Anything to do with rent and all those attempts, you need to include it in your evidence. Finally, I always included repair and maintenance. At the very end, our last scheduled inspection, generally 2 to 3 weeks before the hearing. Why? Because if I don't disclose it 7 days in advance of the hearing, I can't use it. So I like to have disclosed the repair and maintenance to show that there's no issue. I would always serve it. If I didn't get a Section 82, would I upload it to the board? It depends. If the tenant was a good tenant, we had cooperation, we have an agreement, I generally wouldn't. Sometimes I would. If the tenant had no communication, I'm disclosing it. If the tenant has played games, I'm disclosing everything, including the repair and maintenance. And then all of my certificates of service, I also put in my evidence binder. Why did I do that? Because when I'm going through the hearing, I make it easy. The board member is going to go, hold on, when was this served? Member, turn to page 6 of the evidence binder. The certificate of service is right there. And it made it easy. They appreciated it because we could go back and forward. They didn't have to go to TOPS and try to find a document number. It was right there in the evidence binder. We could go back and forward. It made the hearing so efficient, and the adjudicators loved it because of the efficiency it brought to the hearing. They didn't have to go on to TOPS and locate certain documents. It was all right there, beautifully laid out in one document. That template I'm sending you has those all beautifully laid out. And then you add it. Yeah.
No, for the landlords that are presenting this information, would you suggest that they rehearse this before they go into it?
I would suggest being super prepared, but do not produce a script. You can tell the landlords that have written out a script, because once the adjudicator pulls them off the script, oh man, all bets off. They're gone. They're like out in Mars, lost and get destroyed. It's just not fun watching them. Because they start off really good and everything sounds good. And then the adjudicator asks an unexpected question and off script, frozen. Now, I don't recommend a script. I recommend knowing your information really well, being super organized, watching some hearings, and speak in front of the mirror a couple of times, but
So
don't script anything. Yes, you got it. Don't script. Yeah, or ramble. I don't know how many times landlords have rambled themselves into a winning position to a losing position because they've rambled on. Your obligation is to prove the essential elements of your N4, and that's it. And it's all around payment, Section 83 and Section 82, and your hardships at the very end. Are you in mortgage default? Section 202 of the Act allows you as the landlord to speak to the adjudicator and say, I need an eviction because, and list your financial hardships or your life circumstances. 202 makes the adjudicator have to listen to that when they're making a decision. So if you're in mortgage default, if you can't afford certain activities, medication, life, if it's an undue prejudice to you, you can disclose all that to the board member. They might expect some proof, so do prepare for some proof, but they have to hear it, and it's appropriate for you to talk about it. Can you say that the tenant's done drugs and they beat up another tenant and blah, blah? No. Those aren't 202 issues. Keep it related to rent and finances when doing an N4. That's what's key. Keep it relevant to the application and the notice itself.
What could cause an adjudicator to lose confidence in the landlord's case?
Oh, great question. Disorganization, but more importantly, a white lie. Holy crap. They are, no. I was going to say they're trained to uncover. They can spot when you're lying through asking questions and stuff. If you've lied a few times, holy crap, do you ever quickly lose the adjudicator's patience and confidence in your case? And also, if they've asked if you've read the rules and you say, yes, I have, and they question you on it and you're blubbering through it, that's not good either. It's better to say, no, member, I apologize. I didn't because, and ask for sympathy rather than asking for permission. And many adjudicators, based on your behavior and your attitude, will grant you the leniency, especially if they can see that you're starting to get a bit scattered. Take a breath. Lie to them, forget it. Patients are gone and they're no longer hearing. Another thing that will make will make an adjudicator lose absolute confidence in your case is if they've warned you once that it wasn't relevant to your matter and you continue on and you continue to argue with them that it's relevant. You present it to the record and say, member, I believe that this is relevant because, and what you're doing is something called preserving the record, which means if you believe that it's super relevant, you can appeal it later, but don't continue arguing with the adjudicator that it's relevant because they've already closed their ears and they're not listening to you anymore. If you believe something is super relevant and the adjudicator says, no, it's not, and they stop listening, say this. For the record, member, I am pleading this. For the record is a term that legal representatives use all the time, means to the adjudicator, quiet, I'm saying something, it's for the record later if I want to appeal. So for the record, I am saying, and then quickly what you're saying and stop. And don't bring it up again. You've preserved it for the record on review or appeal if you believe it's relevant and the adjudicator didn't consider it. But you have no point in arguing with the adjudicator because they shut off their ears. They're no longer listening to you. You're just upsetting them. And the next thing you say, they're probably not listening to it either. And that might be super crucial. That's something they should have heard. So for the record, state your piece, pause, and move on.
Now, we know that tenants can bring up some crazy stuff at a hearing, and we want to kind of give our guidance to landlords who are emotionally attached to their rental units. How do you respond if a tenant makes accusations during a hearing that the landlords know? Like, what advice would you want to give those landlords?
Cross-examination is your best friend, and reserving the art of cross-examination is so powerful. Those are direct questions where you can uncover the lies of the tenant. So if you're going to do anything and be self-represented as a landlord, watch as many YouTube videos as possible on the art of cross-examination and how to frame cross-examination questions, and ask the tenant these direct cross-examination questions in a way that blocks them in yes or no. There's no point in arguing with them. Let the information come directly from the tenant and show the inconsistency through questioning. So look up every single YouTube video on the art of cross-examination and how to ask cross-examination questions. We spend so much time as legal reps learning this because it's really truly the difference between uncovering a tenant's BS and letting it slide. And it's all in how you
filtered here, Jordan. You can say bullshit.
Well, there you go. The hell with it.
Now, would you be interested in coming back on and doing a cross-examination live? I think that would be, why put everybody to another YouTube video when you could be the teacher? So we'll have to bring that back to our following.
Let's do it. I loved cross-examination. And it's one of those opportunities where you can ask anything relevant to the case in a position that just completely unravels the tenant's bullshit just through the art of questioning. You don't have to argue back. You just have to answer the questions. You watch them squirm. You watch it get under their skin, and the adjudicator says it's a fair question. Answer it. And the tenant goes, "Do I really have to answer it?" And the adjudicator says, "Yes, answer the question." And if you didn't get the answer you want, you ask another direct examination question exactly in the same way until you elicit that answer. And it's so beautiful. But that's how you do it, not by arguing, but by showing the tenant that what they said is stupid and way out of there.
Now, Jordan, you got out of this field because you've seen how broken the system really is. And tell us what you're doing now as your newfound adventure that I think all of us should be supporting you on.
That's fair. That's fair. Yes. Essentially, now we have a public speaking channel where we are teaching and having people build confidence to present their cases, not just in the legal world, but also in the sales and professional world. How do you become a better communicator? How do you present with confidence? And yes, the Sales More Offer Challenge is directed to professionals, realtors, and everything looking to present cases to buyers, to sellers, etc. But we have a modified version of it for all landlords and representatives on how do you present your case in front of the adjudicator with confidence, speak with clarity, and demand authority. Adjudicators, they're not supposed to be biased, but gosh darn it, every human is biased. They really truly are. And your nonverbal communication is about 80% of everything said. So we look for behaviors, squirming, not squirming. How do you present? Are you standing up straight, presenting to the adjudicator with confidence? Are you speaking clearly? Are you not rambling? And when you're doing cross-examination questions, what are you looking for in the tenant? Because it's not just about how they answer, it's also how they answer with body language. And should you go down that line further to uncover something that they're going to say that really harms them? And the more squirmy they get, the more likely you're going to get out a good lie that's going to prove your case. So it's the form of communication that we teach. And I absolutely love it. Ooh, what's this?
I know. Try to keep up on the comments here. I know that we'll make sure that Jordan and I are following up with all the comments from this video. And thank you for everyone for commenting. And definitely, I think we should do like a private webinar. Hey, Jordan, you up for that too? Just to give everybody some more guidance, because I think we're only touching on what they need to learn just for a non-payment of rent, for God's sake. So I definitely think that there's so much education is the key, especially in this industry. And it's so sad to see that our tenants know a lot more about how to proceed than our landlords do. So we want to make sure that we're giving you the right people to help guide you through this crazy process. It is a good business to be in, but we are going to come up against, tenant unions who are just thinking that landlords are a social agency for the government with no compensation, unfortunately. And they are rough, and they're using ChatGPT against us now, uploading their evidence files at the Landlord and Tenant Board from ChatGPT. And I was showing Jordan as something that I wanted to show everyone tonight, because we laughed so hard. And I'm like, wait, you didn't see it. We got to do this. We got to do this a little bit more raw and unfiltered. So as you guys know, that Front Lobby just had their webinar with TransUnion. Great. I'm actually going to try to get that before this segment actually ends. But we do have a little bit of conversation starter that happened on to Ontario Landlords Watch public page. So we have our public page and then we have our group. And what had happened is that we had this tenant because he was angry. He was very, very angry. And he was obviously thinking that landlords should be providing free services and free rent and everything in between that. And he obviously was upset that Front Lobby was having this webinar with TransUnion, that he came onto this page. And obviously I shared it onto Ontario Landlords Watch, and anyone who wants to watch the legit webinar that was hosted with TransUnion, I'm posting that into the comments here. But this was the picture. I was supposed to be a part of it. I was in Hamilton with my husband. We were at a specialist appointment with that he had a stroke, so we had to see the doc on that. So I wasn't able to make it, but I was supposed to be a part of it. And this was supposed to be a highlight of my career of being a housing advocate. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it, but it was a great webinar, especially from TransUnion, knowing they are now a part of this 3 bureaus from Equifax, Landlord Credit Bureau, and TransUnion, and anyone should listen to that. And I posted the link there. So this tenant had came onto our page and was so crazy, calling landlords parasites. Obviously, I hate when they do that. So I replied back to them, and he ended up taking this photo and put it through ChatGPT, because he was also not only calling us parasites, but he was calling landlords pirates. So that is what he created. I got to shout out to how ChatGPT has grown over the last 6 months. And I found this fantastic. And I just thought that, it was worth highlighting, because it got to show how, the professional tenants are so angry that credit bureaus are now identifying rent payments to be a part of their financial risks, and that you can't get away with not paying your landlord anymore, because you will be reported to the credit bureaus. I think I'm going to be a pirate, though, Jordan, for the next Halloween party with KW Property Management's properties. Shout out to our sponsors there. But yeah, I thought that was just he just put it out there. I'm like, thank you, buddy. Thank you so much. No matter which way it looks like, we're not pirates. We're holding people accountable. We're holding people accountable. We're creating a system for transparency. We're hosting a place where landlords are able to communicate with each other by making sure that they can communicate with one another and report the tenants that need to be recognized for paying their rent on time, and highlighting the ones that think that they can abuse the system. And this is what Front Lobby does. And that's why they've been recognized by Equifax and TransUnion and the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. So this is the key factor that every landlord needs to be a part of. And I know it's just a small fee for a membership to be a part of Front Lobby, but we need to be incorporating that into what we do as landlords. We need to be professional, and we need to make sure that we have the tools at our disposal, because guess what? The government is very slow to listen. I love that they're listening now with Bill 60. I think it's only a haircut. I think we need a lot more. And I'm glad that Jordan is here with us today, because he's highlighting the broken system, and he's highlighting the fact that we do need to have a reform of what the Landlord and Tenant Board actually is. I think we need to see new faces as the executive directors of the Landlord and Tenant Board, and see some massive changes that do protect the housing providers who are providing housing to the people who can't buy, who, because of the reason they don't want to, or they don't have good credit, or they don't have a good job, or they don't have the down payment. Private housing providers are a necessity to our community. And I know that we see more and more landlords exiting long-term rental units. And it's sad to see that after so many years of us, being able to put everything on the line and our risks, but we do need to know that we have professionals in this industry that we need to listen to. And I'm glad that Jordan's here today. Now, Jordan, if you had an elected official in front of you right now, what would you want them to change in order to make it fair for the good landlords and the good tenants, and especially our taxpayers? Because I don't think taxpayers understand what they're paying for because of the mismanagement of failures of the housing at all levels of government.
Yeah, the sad thing, Kayla, that you said there is you said elected official, because the Landlord and Tenant Board, the bureaucracy of the board, has layers of players that are not elected and do not go through government changes. So who are they responding to? Who are they listening to? The problem with bureaucrats is they can become absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If I was speaking to an elected official right now, it would be go in there, overhaul the board, scrap out the bad players, eliminate some of the terms of the worst offending adjudicators out there, eliminate the bureaucracy, and start something listening to the tenants of Ontario and the landlords of Ontario, and follow the jurisdictions that don't have this mess. Remember, Doug Ford said it himself that we are one of the most over legislative jurisdictions when it comes to housing power. That is coming from our government. So if he's listening and he's recognizing that, fix it. Get on board with it. Abolish the LTB system. Come up with a system listening to all of the stakeholders, and balance our laws so we create an incentive for investment here. Not every single tenant is a bad tenant. Not every single landlord is a good landlord. But we need to be able to have a system that actively eliminates the worst offending slumlords and the criminal tenants. And there's a ton of criminal tenants out there. There's a ton of slumlords out there. The system isn't working for either. And all that it is doing is penalizing and punishing good landlords and good tenants. And we need an overhaul of the entire legislation to make it work for the taxpayer base, for us, stakeholders. Remember, we're the true stakeholders of the system. We're either paying in it by being tenants, we're investing in it, or we're providing services. They need to listen to us, not the bureaucrats, not the elected officials inside that have their opinions, but us as all of the stakeholders in this province. And that is why we need a system that works for everybody. And the current one is broken. Years of talking about change, years of nothing changing, government officials coming and going. Who's not coming and going? It's the damn bureaucrats at the top, and those people need to be eliminated.
I love you. You know what? It was well said. It was well said. You got to see like the city councilors of Ottawa taking pictures of tenant unions, supporting tenant unions, disregarding that they're supposed to be representatives for all landlords, tenants, and taxpayers included, and just knowing that the division is actually breaking our housing system even more. And this is why this gentleman who did create that little ChatGPT image, I've invited him to be on this show. I wanted you, I'm like, you had so much to say with your ChatGPT, taking everything that I said with facts and not gaslighting. And instead, he did not want to come on the show. And I think it's important. Like, we want to hear tenants too. So if you're a tenant, I want to hear what you have to say, because we do know we have bad landlords out there. But usually through the process is that bad landlords go out of business because of the fact that we had the supply and we have the options for these type of tenants. And we became a country that was taking in way more people than we can actually house. We took the schools had taken advantage of international students. And so this had really caused that influx of rents to now increasing. And now we're seeing such an influx of landlords now struggling to find quality tenants, and tenants now have the ability to negotiate a lot on their rent. So again, it comes down to just bad housing policies, elected officials not listening to us. And why they're not listening to us, it's more on the fact that there's elections that are coming, and it's about the political theater that they're trying to do. deep down, and we need to start pulling our efforts together. So stay tuned. We're going to be having a little intake form. I've never wanted to be an Ontario Landlords Watch paid membership. It's never, ever going to be a paid membership for our landlords, but I do need to know how many landlords are out there, where you're located, what information you want me to share with you, because like I mentioned in the beginning of this call, is that there's a lot of movement happening at the municipal level, which is giving you some scariness from renovations, safe apartment licensing, water billing, everything like that. I want to make sure that we're getting that information out to our landlords in those areas. So we're going to do an intake of who you are, where you're located, where your rental units are, so that we have a better way of communicating with each other, not just on Facebook or TikTok or LinkedIn. I want to be able to, hey, if we need to do a mail out to you, I want to make sure that I can get that information to you. If we can phone call you and let you know what's happening at your council, I also want to do that. And definitely a part of our newsletter that I want to create for our community, so that you are on the go. And I would love, Jordan, for you to be a regular blog writer for this newsletter as well, because it's about education for our community. And it's so, so important. I really want all of our members not only to get educated, but I want you to know the importance of advocating for this industry that we love so much. And we love it because we are good landlords, and we want to provide great units for our tenants. And we want to be able to provide our elected officials with solid advice from people who are in the trenches, like you, Jordan, like myself, being a landlord, and everyone in our community. Jordan, if you can give a bit of advice, and I want you to make sure that you get your contact information. I want you to put it in the comments as well, Jordan, for everyone to contact you, so we can follow you on your new journey and support you and contact you, because I love what you're doing as well. And we need to support each other in this crazy world of real estate.
Yes, that's fair. I guess the most important advice to any landlord, and it's cliche, but the knowledge is power. And it really, truly 100% is. The fact that you're watching this, you're learning is great. You're consuming the resources to make you a better landlord and to fight against the corruption of the system. The more you know, and the more you study the Residential Tenancies Act, the more you can get around the loopholes of the bureaucracy, the more you can protect yourself from the absolute ridiculousness. So it's important to be educated and be involved. We can't be sitting there quietly. So every letter you write to your MPP, whether it falls on deaf ears or not, is important. Every one of these communities you engage in is so significantly important. We need our voices heard at all levels of government. And as a stakeholder, you need to be involved. Write a letter, chat, bring this to attention. So consume more knowledge and get more involvement. Don't sit on the sidelines. We're going to continue to advocate for change. And hopefully, one day a miracle happens and there is change. It hasn't happened in the last 10 years, but maybe at some point in the future, it certainly will. What we don't want it to ever do is degrade even further. And we would allow it to degrade further if we sat there and been complacent and quiet. So that is what we don't ever want to do. So just because you think it falls on deaf ears, it doesn't. Every communication really, truly matters. Communicate, communicate, communicate.
And you know what, Jordan, I put your information in there. I hope it's the right one if you want to take a look. So it's the Sell More Challenges Beyond link that you sent me earlier. I put that into the chat for people to reach out to you. I do know that I'm working on a roundtable, hopefully, with the provincial government. So hopefully we are successful with that. And if so, Jordan, I definitely want you to be a part of that voice, because as a landlord, a public speaker, and a past paralegal dealing with the back and forth at the landlord and kangaroo court system, I definitely need your voice to be at that table, so we can help guide our elected officials to make the changes that we truly need to protect our good landlords and our good tenants of Ontario. Thank you, Jordan, for being a part of this. I'm sure we're going to have you on again. You have been a highlight of me doing this. I love trying to get on here and tell everybody what's happening, what's going on. It's a little bit easier. Stay tuned to my post that's going to be coming up next week, even down to a homeless and homeless organization who is making $282,000 a year salary. And so definitely want to make sure that we cover everything from Landlord and Tenant Board to social housing, supportive housing, nonprofit organizations. I think we need to make sure that this is a big iceberg and we're only looking at what's on top. We need to make sure that we're looking at the bottom as well. Thank you so much for Jordan for joining me tonight, and everyone watching. Please subscribe to our Ontario Landlords Watch YouTube channel. Share this with your friends and following, and make sure that we are supporting Jordan, our friend who is outspoken and absolutely lovely to hear everything in your wisdom to our landlords.
And I appreciate it. And just for that one tenant, if you're watching this, I want to be a pirate too.
We'll make sure it happens, Jordan. Happy renting, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me.